So now we will discuss about the British political system. I have designed this lecture in such a way that we will first discuss what are the powers of Prime Minister, Cabinet, Parliament and the monarch. And the two very famous questions that were asked in the past papers about the how the cabinet has assumed the dictatorship power and the prime minister is shining moon among the stars. So we will discuss these both questions in our coming lecture. So first of all, this is an unwritten constitution, or you may say this is child of the conventions. Likewise, it is based upon the Westminster model. What is the Westminster model? It is a model that combines the legislative and the executive powers. And these powers are mainly housed in the cabinet of the UK. And later on, I will discuss how. Unlike the US system, which we studied, which was a completely rigid and written constitution, the British constitution is slightly flexible and just requires 1/2 of the majority of both houses. Okay, so there is a very famous quotation of A.V. Dicey that says that British Parliament can make or unmake any or whatever type of the law. Only it just cannot make laws against the natural laws. I mean that it just cannot make a male or a female, or it cannot convert a female into male. So within the natural laws, Parliament can make any type of law. And when I'm saying about the Parliament, I'm talking about the lower house, because the upper house, which is the House of Lords, has slightly a small number of powers as compared to the Parliament. So let's see that how the prime minister is a shining moon among the stars. So prime minister, there is a very famous quotation about Sir Ivor Jennings in his writing The Cabinet Government. He says the prime minister is a keystone of the cabinet arc. You must write it. It's a very famous quotation. Okay, so let's delve into the powers of prime minister. So first of all, the prime minister has power of appointment and dismissal. He appoints all his cabinet. He has free hand of doing so. Although on paper, the crown actually appoints and approves, but on reality, it is the prime minister who appoints it. So, okay, let's see. Margaret Thatcher. Okay, so this is a very famous case of Margaret Thatcher, George Hove. He was actually the deputy prime minister. And in 1990 or 1989, he gave a very infamous speech where he was actually targeting Margaret Thatcher for not selecting euro for not converting it to the euro. And when he resigned, at the same time, it led to the fall of the Margaret Thatcher. That was about 11 year of the serving period. Okay, so after the appointment, the cabinet. Yes, the prime minister chairs the cabinet. He is the leader of the cabinet, and the cabinet meets the weekly, and prime minister controls it. Next is he controls the intelligence, but it is very often because it was just Tony Blair who received the Joint Intelligence Commission, who actually received Joint Intelligence Committee. That was about the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, and it was about that. Okay, so there is a very something very different about the Tony Blair, that he was someone, his government is called sofa government, because he discussed all his decision in the Downing Street and not in the full cabinet. Next one, we have the prerogative powers. So prime minister can deploy armed forces. He can sign and ratify treaties. After he can do so, these both powers after the approval of the parliament. The example here I want to give about the Brexit. The Brexit in such a way that the two prime ministers of the British history, they both tried to make the parliament sign the Brexit, but unfortunately they couldn't. At the same time, when I was talking about that how The next, we have the power of the dissolution. When I'm saying about the power of the dissolution, Prime Minister has this power that if Prime Minister resigns, the whole cabinet dissolves, and at the same time, the government has to re-elect the Prime Minister, and elections will take place. So yes, Prime Minister can threaten the cabinet for dissolving. And this, yes, under fixed term Parliament Act, the dissolution requires 2 by 3rd of the vote. But if it's not there, Prime Minister can resign and the cabinet will dissolve. Yes, in Rishi Sunak case, it was done. Domination of legislature. As a leader of the majority party, Prime Minister commands the Commons through whips. What is this now, whips? Whips is something that the government or the Prime Minister has strict legislature over his cabinet and all over the house to comply with whatever the legislature or whatever the command party gives. If they don't give, it will lead to the whips, 3-line whips, and if anyone gets 3 warnings, it will lead to the resignation of that specific person. At the same time, it's the leader and communication between crown and the cabinet. I have made a comparison between the power of UK Prime Minister and US President because it is often asked in the paper. So about the point in power, UK Prime Minister. Okay, so first of all, the UK Prime Minister is elected by the majority in the House or in the Parliament. The major party who gets the most seats, MPs in the Parliament, the party decides the Prime Minister. Next, in the Prime Minister of US, the Senate gives the confirmation to the President. And next we will talk about the legislative powers. So all the bills, all the commands pass through the Parliament or through the Prime Minister. And the commands of the bills are separate from Congress, and no legislative majority is guaranteed because the president can give executive powers, but it's separated from the Congress. Next one is a dissolution. Okay, so when the Prime Minister Prime Minister can choose the election timing. At the same time, if the Prime Minister will resign, the government instantly has to take the re-elections. It has a term limit of 4 years. Here there is no limit and no dissolution power. If in any case the US Prime Minister dies or is not present, then Vice President becomes the Prime Minister. Okay, so the Prime Minister of the UK require the parliamentary ratification. The Parliament has to give the consent, and after that the Prime Minister will ratify. The case is of Brexit. Again, I'm saying this, and at the same time, the Senate also US also require the Senate ratification by 2 by 3rd majority. Okay. So war making. Most of the case, UK Prime Minister don't has the power to invoke into the war without the consent of Prime Minister, but Tony Blair did it 3 times. Although the Parliament was quite against it, but the Tony Blair said that it was something about national security. And the US Prime Minister is commander-in-chief. He can also wage war, but after the approval of Senate. There is no veto power, but yes, here is the veto power. Okay, so the vote of no confidence is present in the UK President powers. Theresa May survived 2 no confidence in 2018 and in the 2019. Okay, so what is that US President can also be impeached by the both houses, but still now only Trump and Bill Clinton, they were quite being targeted for impeachment, but still they have not impeached because the Senate didn't give the consent. Next, yes, weekly Prime Minister questions is being asked direct from the Commons, but here there is no accountability like this. But yes, a past system of checks and balances is still present, but that's a different case. This constitution is unwritten. This is a rigid and a written constitution. So the term limit here is okay, there is no term limit. Thatcher served for like 11 years. And here is a term limit of 2 times and a 4. And this was after the 22nd Amendment, like after FDR, Frederick D. Roosevelt, who served for 4 times, and after that an amendment came that only Prime Minister can serve for like uh, 2 terms. Okay, this is a very important quotation of RHS Crossman where he says, the cabinet has been reduced to a subordinate role under the all powerful figure who is the Prime Minister. So you can quote this thing. Next, I have wrote about the dominance of the Margaret Thatcher. You can give it a read. And Blair's sofa government. I have also told you above about this, that how he decides all the decisions in the down street, but not in the cabinet. Okay, so the next part of our lecture is how the cabinet has assumed the dictatorial powers. Means how the cabinet is above parliament, how the cabinet also controls the prime minister, how the cabinet is stronger than House of Lords, and yes, how the cabinet possesses more powers than the crown. Okay, so the cabinet is a committee of legislative body selected to be the executive body. Means this is a very important definition by Bighood. This is something about what we above talked about. This was actually the system of Westminster, where the powers of executive and legislative powers are connected. Yes, so the cabinet is a group of people which connect the powers of executive and the legislative. Walter Bigod, you have to quote this man. Next, come to the executive powers of cabinet. First, you see, it is the collective responsibility. All members of the cabinet, they work as a unit, not as individuals. They control the legislative program, no doubt. They make laws. Very interesting. I'm giving it a star. This is something which is not present in the constitution of other people. That this is that the delegated legislature and the control the public finance. All the money bills pass through it. Now, okay, just give it a read. Collective responsibility. All the cabinet member must publicly support the cabinet decisions. This create a united executive front. If one minister disagrees, then the whole government will fall. This was happened in Geoffrey Hove case. I have told you about that how Geoffrey Hove resignation led to the fall of Margaret Thatcher. How it controls the legislative programs, all the parliament whipping system. I've told you that cabinet decides determines which bills are to be introduced, in what order and in which conditions. Next we were talking about the delegated powers. The parliament grants the minister a very sweeping power that they can make a secondary legislature or what we call statutory instruments. And these statutory instruments are basically amendment in the present law, and they don't require the parliamentary debates. And in US, in UK, it is being observed that there are over 3,000 statutory instruments per year. In the Public Health Act, there are 350 plus statutory instruments being introduced. Next, the cabinet decides what the budget has to be, and what parliament just votes on it, and actually it is the cabinet who controls and decides. You must mention Harold Lasky. He says that cabinet is the supreme governing body. It just controls what it controls: legislative, finance, military and foreign policy. And it while on the other hand, parliament sections what the cabinet proposes. So what he says that it controls legislature, finance, military, foreign policy and sanctions. Next, we have the case study of COVID regulations, where Boris Johnson issued 350 plus statutory instruments. Okay, so moving towards the legislative power of cabinet, these are almost the same. The three-line whip that I have told you earlier, that cabinet chief whips the issues to all the government MPs who goes against the party mandate. It was done in 2019. About like seven congressmen. It was to seven congressmen. It was being done. Parliamentary timetable. It is the cabinet minister who controls all the parliamentary business, opposition, benchmark debates. Next is statutory instruments. I have told you in detail that about 350 plus statutory instruments were being issued by the Boris Johnson. Next is money bill, again discussed. Parliamentary act, very interesting. What happened that the uh, cabinet actually limited the power of the House of Lords? How? By amendment in the Parliamentary Act of 1911. They said that the uh, House of Lords cannot delay the bill twice in twice, and it cannot do this in single year. Before that, it was power that House of Lords can delay the bill two times in 2 years. So it just limited its power after 1 year. So its examples are like War Crime Act and Sexual Offence Act 2000. Henry's 8 clauses. These are also very interesting, that these are actually the acts of parliamentary by statutory instrument that allow the executive to modify the law without the parliamentary consent. I think that I have discussed this in the delegated legislature. But okay, there are some examples about Public Bodies Act of 2011. Moving, yes, the Parliamentary Act 1979, it's almost the same. So let's move toward our next part, that is how Parliament overpowers the Parliament, overpowers the cabinet. So let's come toward the powers. First of all, the Parliament holds the vote of no confidence. This was done against the Theresa May. The Prime Minister's question. Every Wednesday, 12 noon, Prime Minister faces 30 minutes of direct questions from its MP. And it's great. At the same time, and it just destroys the confidence of that Prime Minister. Theresa destroyed over Brexit in 2018 to 2019. And still, yes, the committee scrutiny in US political system. We also discussed the importance of the committee system, but it is also present here. The Public Account Committee, who scrutinizes all the government spending. Select Committee, and all like special committees about 2011 phone hacking scandal. Next, what happened, that backbench the rebellion. All the government MPs can rebel against their own cabinet. It was observed that Theresa Martin, who gave the bill about the Brexit, this was withdrawal agreement was being defeated 3 times with a very big margin. It showed that yes, the MPs can go against the Prime Minister. And House of Lords division. House of Lords defeated the government over electoral integrity bill 5 times before the Commons overturned the amendments. So yes, House of Lords can also change this. Next, we have the utility of institution of monarch in the British Constitution. So there's a very famous quotation about the monarch has right to only the monarch has three powers: right to consult, right to encourage, and the right to warn. And over the period of time, monarch has given its power to the parliament. So let's see. First of all, what is this? Okay, so the powers. Okay, so about the powers of the monarch. First of all, what is the? It is the head of state. There is a difference between the head of state and the head of government. And whenever any foreign visit or head of state visit, he first meets the king or queen. Secondly, it's a royal accent. All acts of the parliament require the royal accent to become the law. It was just the Queen of Anne in 1708 about the Scottish Militia Bill, where she refused to give the accent, but normally it is convention that the crown gives accent to all the bills and laws, all the bills, and then they become the law. Appointment of the prime minister. It is the crown who gave the consent to the prime minister and approves the appointment of the prime minister. But but there was a time when George V used his role during the 1971 national crisis, where he exerted his powers, and when the prime minister refused to resign after losing the vote of no confidence. So there was a sort of crisis where the king emerged and led to the national integrity, reserve powers. Okay, so what is that? Usually it is a convention that the prime minister assents to all the bill, but yes, he can refuse. He can dismiss a prime minister. He holds all these power and can use them. And it's a symbol of national unity. How it is that during the time of COVID, Queen Elizabeth II broadcast, and it was being watched by 24 million. The people are emotionally and psychologically connected to the royalty. Commonwealth. So the king is head of Commonwealth. It's 56 nation organization. So it's actually uniting 2.5 billion people. Now, what are some of the negative points against the monarch? So first of all, it is undemocratic principle. There is no legal basis, or there is no reason why monarchs will exist. Number second is a cost. It cost about £1 per UK citizen, although it is not a big amount, but still it matters. Now there is also a problem that when the king unlawfully interferes in the matters of parliament. It was King Charles, who is the current king and was the Prince of Wales at that time. He wrote letters to some of the ministers where he was being discussing about the policies regarding agriculture and foreign affairs. So it was being leaked, which is known as the Black Spider Memo. Next, we have the Begod defense stance. What does he says? He has to summarize the whole conversation, and he says that the monarch provides a focus of loyalty, allows British people to be critical in their politicians without being disloyal. So there is a balance between the loyalty and being a politician. And this was the same thing which was said by the uh, Bogdanor in Monarchy and the Constitution. And this is all. If you people have any questions, so you can ask. Thank you so much.